أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم اللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين إلى قيام يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم كن لوليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. So this class is about building an Islamic household. جيد. It's a class that we started about a year or two ago. And the reason behind it is that we find, a need for such classes these days, especially with the high divorce rate that we witness. Secondly, especially with the errors or the mistakes that certain parents fall into regarding raising their children. Jayid. And we know that one of the biggest challenges we're facing in this era is that there are movements and groups trying to spoil children from their childhood. So if a person does not know how to properly establish an Islamic household, it is very likely that his children will be misled in the near or distant future. In fact, he or his spouse might also be misled. So I found it necessary to shed light on the Quranic verses and or the ahadith, the narrations of Ahlul Bait alayhim salam, that speak about this topic. And believe it or not, we have a fortune of nusus, a fortune of texts, Quranic verses and narrations that speak about these issues, that speak about marriage, that speak about the right spouse, that speak about spousal treatment, how you should treat your spouse, and that speak about raising children and how a father or mother should behave in his or her house. Jayid. Last year we covered the topic of choosing the right spouse. So we mentioned multiple narrations regarding the right wife, the good wife, and regarding the right husband, the good husband. Now, we did mention previously that in this class, we mention what is best to be done when we want to get married or we want to establish a household. Jayid. Some of the points we mention are not wajib, not mandatory, but if you apply them, it will be better. Tamam? For example, we mentioned last year, before Ashura, that one of the most important traits in a good spouse, meaning a good husband or a good wife, is iman, is faith. Another very important trait is piety. A third very important trait is good morals, that the husband or the wife should have good morals. One might tell me, what if I find, for example, a mu'mina who has bad morals? Can I marry her? I tell him, if you're asking me from a fiqhi perspective, then yes, you can marry her. She's a mu'mina. But if you ask me from an advice perspective, what's better? No, it's better not to marry her, because Ahlul Bayt told you alayhi salam to avoid, such individuals. For marriage, of course, to avoid getting married to such individuals. So not every point we mention in this class or these classes is wajib, but when we bring a Quranic verse or a narration from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam saying, do 1, 2, 3, do these specific deeds, obviously it would be better to follow the advice of Allah or Ahlul Bayt alayhim salat wassalam, because Allah and Ahlul Bayt only give the best advice. Salamullahi ala Ahlul Bayt. All right? Again, this is if Allah or Ahlul Bayt are mentioning something that's not wajib. Sometimes no, the Imam will tell you that this is a must. You have to follow it. In this case, you have to follow it. You cannot violate the Imam's command. For example, someone finds a lady who he finds suitable for marriage, but that lady is kafira. She's not even a Muslim and not from Ahlul Kitab. Can he marry her? No, he can't. He might tell me, but Sheikh, she has the best of morals and she's this and that. Khalas, Allah said you can't. You can't marry her. So long that she's a kafira. If she becomes Muslim, you can marry her. If she becomes a Muslim, you can marry her. So we have laws regarding marriage that have to be followed, just as we have laws regarding other topics that have to be followed. Then again, we also have recommendations given to us by Ahlul Bait salawatullah wa salamuhu alayhim. Following these recommendations would be better, but it's not a must. This applies not only to marriage. Take, for example, mathalan, foods and drinks, eating and drinking. With eating and drinking, we have laws, strict laws, right? For example, you can't eat pork. Khalas, that's a law. One of the fundamental laws in Islam. You can't eat pork. You can't drink wine. But then you have recommendations on how to eat halal food, right? What should you do when you eat? These are recommendations. If you follow them, it's better, but it's not a must. So we mentioned last year, who is the good wife? What traits does he have? And who is the good husband? What traits does he have? Now I want to carry on where we left off. After understanding that 3 essential traits that should be found in a husband or a wife are faith, iman, belief in Allah Ta'ala and Ahlul Bait alayhim salam, piety and morals, we say the following. Suppose that someone, all right, found someone that has these traits. Now what? What should be done? It would be wise to mention your expectations to your future wife or future husband. In better terms, you found someone who seems to be suitable. He's a suitable match or she's a suitable match for you. Now, before you get married, it's not a must, but it would be wise to mention your expectations. What do you expect? How do you want to live your life? What kind of lifestyle do you want to have? Both of them should mention what they expect to each other. Why? So that they ensure they're on the same page. And so that no one later on says, you know what, I did not sign up for this. When you mention your expectations, the other individual will be able to determine if he can actually uphold the conditions that he or she wants, that you want him or her to uphold. And he'll be able to determine if he can or she can withstand that lifestyle. Exactly. If they want, ahsantum. They don't want to, exactly. For example, some people, some mu'mineen, they want to have a very religious lifestyle. And that's beautiful. By very religious, I mean, they don't want to simply perform the wajibat and avoid the muharramat. They want more than that. They want their life to revolve around Hajj, Umrah, Ziyarah, going to the shrines of Ahlul Bait, Majalis Ahlul Bait, Hawza classes, doing good deeds, providing, for example, the poor with clothing, food, and the likes. They want to, they want to enjoy their lives, obviously, but they want a big chunk of their life, and especially their spousal life, to be dedicated to what? To such deeds. Salat, Quran, dua, sadaqat, ziyarah, hajj, etc. Not all mu'mineen want that, which is a bit sad, but that's the reality. Some mu'mineen, they tell you, yes, we want to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We don't want to disobey God, but we don't want that level of religiosity or that level of spirituality. So here, if the man or the woman wants such a lifestyle, he or she should be explicit about it to his or her spouse. Sahih? Person should say that I expect my lifestyle to be in the following way. Can you uphold such a lifestyle? Can you withstand it? Can you adapt to it? Tamam? The same applies to, for example, other matters. مثلا, children. Does the person want to have children or not? In most cases, the spouse, the man or the woman, wants to have children. جيد? But speaking about these matters at the very beginning of their marital life, in fact, before they get married, is good. It's good. It's wise, so that they're on the same page. The same applies to, for example, location. Sometimes, someone wants to stay in a specific city. For example, a sister does not want to abandon her hometown. She wants to get married, but she wants to stay beside her family members. She does not want to travel and, become distant, to be distant from them. In that case, she has to express herself and be explicit to the person who's seeking her hand for marriage. And obviously, life is filled with uncertainties, and you never know. Sometimes circumstances change in a way where you're forced to leave your hometown, similar to what's happening to our brothers and sisters and family members in Lebanon, right? Many people, about 1 million Lebanese individuals have been displaced, right? They've went to different places, to basically foreign lands in Lebanon. Tamam? So sometimes the circumstances change in a way where you're forced to leave. But then again, expressing what you want, what you would like, would be good. Again, so that we avoid problems or avoid more problems. And at the same time, we ensure that both of us are on the same page. All right. Both of them mentioned what they expect. They mentioned their expectations. Now what? Suppose that they disagree on certain expectations. What should be done in this case? Here, it would be wise to be wise. It would be wise to be wise. In what sense? If they differ on certain expectations, which is normal, this is normal. Yani, I believe it is very rare to find two individuals that have the exact same expectations, right? So in this case, if they find a bit of differences in what they expect, it would be wise to find a middle agreement, or say a middle ground agreement. What I mean to say is, if you find someone who's suitable, someone who's, again, who's faithful, number one, pious, number two, and he or she has good morals, number three. If they expect something that you do not want to perform, they expect you to uphold a particular condition that you prefer not to uphold, try to find, a solution that would please both individuals. Again, as we said, try to find a middle ground solution. Try to get to a middle ground agreement. Because the person in front of you is what? Is a gem. If you find someone who's mu'min and taqi and khaluq, that person is a gem. So you don't want to lose the opportunity of marrying them for the slightest of reasons. I'm mentioning this because sometimes that's what happens in society. A person will be faithful and taqi, pious, and khaluq, he has good morals or she has good morals. But the individual that wants to marry them, tamam, or the individual that they're seeking, refuses to marry the other individual. Why? For not the best reasons. In fact, sometimes for silly reasons. And that's a problem. That's a problem. Sometimes we create these so-called red flags that shouldn't actually be red flags. I'll give you a few examples. Perhaps I've given examples before, but there's no harm in repeating ourselves. مثلا, you'll find certain people sometimes who might not accept to marry a mu'min or a mu'mina who has faith, akhlaq, and piety, because that individual follows a different marja. That's a valid reason? No, it's not a valid reason. At least
I think it should be a substantial reason.
a substantial reason? How so?
I mean, especially if the marja is too far apart.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it affects daily life. It affects so many things. I mean, even some basic things like, I don't know, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, they can get to they can agree on something, right? Provided that they're both following actual maraja, right? Mujtahideen who uphold, who hold the traits of a marja, the traits that a marja should hold. Then what's the problem? Even if they follow different marja, جيد? What's the problem with that? Ahlul Bait alayhi salam told us to look at iman, to look at piety, جيد? But they didn't tell us that, you know, if he or she follows a different marja, we should not get married to them. At the end of the day, we're all part of the same madhab. Makes sense? So that's the reason why I mentioned this issue, right? Obviously, as you mentioned, if the maraja have, you know, different opinions regarding sensitive matters, such that their lives will become quite difficult because of those laws in which they differ. For example, the laws of tahara, and they can simply agree on, you know, how to deal with those laws, right? How to practice precaution, for example, such that both are comfortable with the tahara of their belongings and the tahara of their house, etc. Yeah, that's just an example. Another example is, مثلا, a person might refuse to marry someone else simply because that someone comes from a different background. Sometimes it's an issue of villages, not an issue of countries. For example, someone who's, I'll talk about my people, right? Someone who's Lebanese will refuse to marry someone else who's Lebanese, and that person's a mu'min. He's khaluq, he has good morals, he has piety, but he refuses because he comes from a village called X. That's Islamic? It's not Islamic. It's not Islamic. Based on the hadith of Ahlul Bait alayhim salam, there's absolutely no problem in marrying someone who comes from a different background, provided, of course, that you can withstand the cultural differences. If you can withstand the cultural differences, then what's the problem? No problem whatsoever. There is no Quranic verse saying that the mu'min who comes from this Lebanese village can only marry a mu'mina who comes from the same village. Or someone who's Iraqi can only marry someone who's Iraqi, or someone who's Yemeni can only marry someone who's Yemeni. I'm using different backgrounds as examples. Islam says the opposite. It says, so what? Khair, inshallah. So what if he's Yemeni and she is Iraqi? Or he is Iraqi and she is Lebanese? Or she is Lebanese and he is from Syria? So what? He's a mu'min, he's khaluq, he's taqi, then that's what we want, right? Obviously, you look for compatibility, and we talked about compatibility last year. But again, I'm just giving examples on certain red flags that we create when there's no need for such red flags. Because I repeat, these days it's not very easy to find someone who has the three traits we mentioned. It's not easy to find someone who's mu'min, taqi, and khaluq. Find those three in someone. That someone is a gem. جيد. Any questions, comments, or even objections on what I'm saying? I like to have discussions in my classes, so that's fine. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Yep. Faithful, pious.
Right?
Mhm.
In a good moment. I don't want to be that big. I'm just wondering, is there a reason for you put it like a rivaya or something like that? But isn't when you say mu'min, isn't that enough? Like, wouldn't the mu'min, a good mu'min, be someone who took the day and who is otherwise they wouldn't necessarily be a mu'min.
Yeah.
Be a Muslim.
Ahsant. So a good mu'min obviously should have those three traits. Yes. But then again, the issue goes back to what we mean by mu'min. Right? Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes we say Fulan is a mu'min and we're talking about we're looking at him from the belief perspective. He's a mu'min in the sense that he follows Islam, believes in Islam, and follows Ahlul Bait. He believes in Ahlul Bait. على الأقل,
we can say that
he's a mu'min when it comes to aqidah, to beliefs. But now when we look at those individuals, Jayyid, or actually let me go back a few steps. Let's start with Muslimin. When we go to the Muslims, we have Muslims who follow Ahlul Bayt, meaning they believe in the sect of Ahlul Bayt, they believe in the beliefs of Ahlul Bayt, they believe in the 12 Imams alayhimus salam. And then you have Muslims who don't believe in the 12 Imams. So now, the Muslim who does not believe in the 12 Imams, you call him what? A Muslim. If you call him a mu'min, you mean that he's a mu'min in Islam, in the general sense. But the real mu'min is who? The one who believes in Ahlul Bayt. Now we're gonna go to level 2. Jayyid. Now when we look at the mu'mineen, meaning those who believe in Ahlul Bayt, they're also divided into different categories. You have a mu'min who barely practices his faith on a practical level. On a practical level, he messes up a lot. Can you call him a kafir? He's not a kafir. You call him muwali. So from the belief perspective, he's a mu'min. You say he's a mu'min because he believes in the 12 Imams alayhim salam, and obviously Allah, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, Yawm al-Qiyamah, Al-Quran, etc. But from a practical perspective, he's he's not a mu'min. He behaves like a kafir. Jayyid. So here you can say that this person is mu'min naqis. He's mu'min, but he has a lot of deficiencies. Or naqisun jiddan. Then again, you have mu'mineen who they mess up. They don't follow all of the Islamic laws, but they follow the main laws. So they'll avoid, for example, drinking wine. They won't commit fornication, God forbid. They won't drink wine. They won't eat pork. They'll pray, they'll fast Shahr Ramadan. But these same mu'mineen will, for example, have the habit of listening to music, right? Or they'll gossip. They won't mind gossiping, right? And talking about people. Afwan. So these are what? These are mu'mineen from the belief perspective. From the practical perspective, they're not totally mu'min because they're allowing themselves, they're giving themselves the green light to disobey Allah Ta'ala whenever they want, although they still follow the main laws. So you can say that they're also naqisin, but not as much as the first group. Make sense? Now we go to a third group of mu'mineen, and those are the ones who strive to follow all of the laws. They're not perfect. Do they slip sometimes? Yes. But they don't want to slip. Their intention is to obey Allah Ta'ala at all times. Sometimes they slip, sometimes they don't. Those are what? Muttaqeen. They are pious. They fear Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because when they sin, they automatically repent. They quickly repent, sorry. So their piety is what? Is restored. Or in better terms, their adala is restored. Yes, Abdullah. Those who, they're the first group of mu'mineen, you mean? They mess up a lot. They're mu'mineen, But on a practical level, it's as if they're not mu'mineen. They barely follow the ahkam. Barely. They believe. Perhaps they do follow some ahkam, but يعني they mess up a lot. Exactly. Yeah. So the third group are what? The let's call them the real mu'mineen. The others aren't mu'mineen. They are mu'mineen from a belief perspective. But these are the real mu'mineen when it comes to beliefs and practices, because they're practicing their religion as well. Make sense? Afwan? Yeah. No problem. The third group? Of course. Yeah. But are they really Shi'as, or do they still have to work on themselves to get to that level? That's the question. The Shi'i is the person who follows the commands of Ahlul Bait. Ahlul Bait say, do X, Y, and Z, he does it. Avoid A, B, C, he avoids it. That's the Shi'i. Yeah. It all depends on the person. Yani, if you want, we can divide the third level of mu'mineen, the third group, into also groups. جيد. This is why I mentioned piety with good morals on top of iman. Because sometimes you might have someone who believes in Allah and Ahlul Bait alayhim salam, but on a practical level he messes up a lot. Or you might find someone who believes in Allah and Ahlul Bait and also practices religion to an extent, but he has bad morals. Mathalan, he has anger issues. He can't control his anger. That's a problem. Or he, مثلا, he has certain habits that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala detests. Okay, he practices the religion to a certain extent. Also, that has those habits. جيد. Or he practices the religion, but he's not too patient. He has patience, but not too much. He needs to work more on his patience. Yeah.
Just wondering, is there a message for us? Instruction for a moment, the sense, because I might not necessarily myself be that person, but the three broad categories, the three broad things that you said.
Yeah.
But I'm looking for someone who is in that category.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of like the path. I'm being hypocritical. I'm not there myself, and I'm looking, but is for somebody who's That's still a good thing, or should I just look at someone who's just one notch better than me and suffice, and that should suffice? Right? I should content myself with that.
Well, as we said in the introduction, following these recommendations is not wajib, but it's better. It's best. So as we said, if you find someone who's, let's say, a mu'minah, and okay, she's from the second group of mu'minin. She follows some ahkam and avoids other ahkam, violates other ahkam. Can you marry her? Yes, she's a mu'minah. You can marry her, right? If I can marry someone from Ahlul Kitab, a lady, if I'm a Muslim man, I can marry a lady who's from Ahlul Kitab, then obviously I can marry a Muslimah. And what would be more obvious is that I can marry a mu'minah, correct? جيد. But is that the best choice? That's the question. When you're marrying someone who allows themselves to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whenever they want, meaning there's a clear deficiency in their taqwa.
I don't have good values myself.
Yeah.
I don't have good values. I don't have good morals myself. Can I still be shooting for the star and looking for somebody who has good values, who's this and that?
What I would say at the moment, to give you an answer that I'm sure of is let us use that to our own advantage. Meaning, let me use these recommendations that Ahlul Bayt have given me regarding who I should marry to better myself. And if I see that I still need to work on myself to get to that level where I am a mu'min who's taqi and who's khaluq, then I'll seek the lady who has these traits, but I'll change myself as well so that I hold these traits. Yeah. جيد. أهلا وسهلا. Okay, I think we're out of time. Let me conclude with one statement and then we'll continue next week, inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, the main message regarding the expectations, the main message I wanted to give is basically when you find someone who's very good, someone who has the traits that Ahlul Bait alayhim salam have mentioned, telling us that these you should look for these traits in your future spouse. When you find someone with those traits, don't let any slight matter or any tiny difference cause you to reject that individual or not to seek them for marriage. Because you're not going to find, it's not the easiest to find a person who has those three traits. Again, sometimes the man and the woman, they disagree on something that's quite huge for both of them or for one of them. For that reason, they don't get married. But sometimes, as we said, the reasons for rejection are, forgive me for my words, silly reasons. Reasons that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Ahlul Bait alayhim salam reject. So why deprive yourself of getting married to such an individual, a person who's a gem, for these reasons that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam did not even preach? That was the main message that I wanted to give. Perhaps some people might, argue with certain examples I gave. That's not an issue. The examples were only given to clarify the point. والحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على المصطفى محمد وآله الطاهرين. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم.